In this video, we'll explore how Starbucks transformed from a simple bean seller into the company that created modern coffee culture. We'll discover Howard Schultz's Italian inspiration that changed everything, learn how they built the third place concept that revolutionized social spaces, and examine their brilliant global expansion strategy. You'll understand the business innovations, technological breakthroughs, and cultural shifts that turned a local Seattle business into a worldwide phenomenon that changed how millions of people experience their daily coffee ritual. In the spring of 1971, three friends in Seattle made a simple promise to each other. They would bring great coffee to a city that did not yet know how good coffee could taste. Their names were Jerry Baldwin, Zev Siegel, and Gordon Bowker. They were not famous, they were not rich, but they loved the smell of freshly roasted beans and the quiet ritual of boiling water, grinding beans by hand, and pouring slowly so the aroma could bloom. When they looked around their city, most stores carried cans of pre-ground coffee on long shelves. The taste was flat and dull. They wanted something brighter and more honest. So on March 30th, 1971, they opened a tiny shop at Pike Place Market and turned on the roaster. It was a small room, but the idea inside it was big. The first store did not feel like an ordinary grocery. The friends used their own hands to build wooden counters and shelves. Along one long wall, they stacked jars and bins filled with whole beans from many places. They were proud of the range they had gathered. They wanted a customer to walk in, take in the warm smell of fresh roast, and feel as if the world had opened. They sold only things that respected the bean: whole coffee, fine teas, spices with clean scent and color, no brewed drinks, no chairs. The store was a workshop for taste, not a cafe. Their goal was simple and clear: help people take better coffee home and brew it well. The details were modest. The space was about 1,000 square feet. The inventory included more than 30 kinds of beans, but the spirit was careful and exact from day one. The name they chose carried salt air and old stories. They picked a symbol from sea lore, a twin-tailed mermaid known as a siren. In the early version, she was printed in brown and white, a nod to woodcut art and the rugged coast. The siren was more than decoration. She pointed back to seafaring trade, to ships that carried green coffee across oceans and into port cities like Seattle. The founders liked that reminder. It tied their small shop to a wider world and to the long journey every bean makes before it reaches a cup. What made the shop different was not only the look or the logo, it was the way they treated the bean. Many stores bought pre-roasted coffee and let it sit on shelves for weeks. The three friends chose a slower path. They roasted their own beans so they could control freshness and flavor. They learned how a roast could bring out bright notes of citrus, or deepen into chocolate and smoke. They measured, timed, and tasted until the profile felt right. Then they taught customers what they had learned. They explained grind size, water temperature, and the difference between drip, press, and other methods. They wrote simple guides. They talked to anyone who asked. They believed a shop should share knowledge first and make money second. This craft mindset and teaching habit are key parts of what later scholars describe as the way specialty coffee markets grow. Small, craft-minded firms expand the skills of customers, build shared language for taste, and create new expectations for quality. In short, they grow the market by helping people learn. Inside the store, the mood was warm but serious. You could hear the soft rattle of beans cooling after a roast. You might see a partner weighing out a pound for a customer and sealing it in a bag with a date. You could ask where the beans were grown and what the roast would taste like, and the person behind the counter would answer in plain words. They might hand you a few beans to nibble and say, "Taste how sweet this is, no sugar added." This simple act of guiding a customer through flavor, origin, and method did more than sell a bag. It built trust. Later research on coffee markets shows how this kind of careful guidance, repeated day after day, turns unfamiliar practices into daily habits for ordinary people. It is patient work. It is also powerful. Outside the store, the world of American coffee in the early 1970s looked very different from what we know now. Instant coffee was common. Many families bought large tins of pre-ground blends because they were cheap and easy. People had grown used to a certain bitterness and a burnt edge. In that setting, a small shop that talked about origin and roast sounded new, even strange. But across the Atlantic and on the West Coast, Another current was building. Coffee drinkers were beginning to care about freshness, provenance, and craft. Historians of coffee show how these shifts took shape over decades, with new techniques, new machines, and new ideas about what a cup could be. Seattle's tiny shop fit into that larger story. It was one small node in a wider change that raised expectations for everyday coffee. Because most people still drank cheap coffee, the shop had to explain why their beans cost more. The answer was not hard to say, but it took time to prove. Better beans grown with care, roasted fresh, stored and brewed the right way. The friends let taste do the talking. They encouraged customers to buy a small amount and try it at home. They offered tips on how to grind right before brewing and how to store beans away from light and heat. They spoke plainly. Good coffee is a fresh food. Treat it like one. Over time, this message took root. Marketing scholars later described how firms in specialty coffee help customers acquire skills and confidence, moving them from old habits toward richer and more varied practices. The first store did this at a very small scale, one conversation at a time. Money was tight. The three friends were careful with every expense. They kept the operation lean and did much of the work themselves. The roaster was not a showpiece. It was a tool they had to master and maintain. Bags had to be filled and labeled. Floors had to be swept. There were no broad ad campaigns or glossy signs, only word of mouth and the pull of the warm smell drifting out to the cobblestones. Growth came slowly, as you would expect for a store that chose craft and teaching over speed. But slow was not a weakness. Slow allowed them to keep standards high and to make sure each decision lined up with their purpose. Regular customers started to appear, some on their way to work, others on quiet errands. They would step in, say hello, ask what was fresh, and pick up a pound for the week. The staff began to remember names and preferences. Someone liked to blend with a nutty finish. Someone else wanted something brighter for a pour-over. These tiny acts of listening and remembering helped the shop feel personal. Later, when the brand grew far beyond Seattle, researchers would examine how the company turned such small touches into a shared culture that gave people a sense of place even when they were far from home. The seeds of that culture were planted right here, in the way the first store cared for each person who walked through the door. Even the look of the store carried a lesson. The brown and white siren on the window told customers that the company respected the long, winding path of coffee across the sea. The hand-built fixtures said the same thing in wood. Someone took time to make this. Someone cared how it felt under the hand. When people asked about the logo, they heard a story about old maps, ships, and trade winds. When they asked about the beans, they heard about farms and roasts. Every part of the place pointed back to the same idea. Coffee is not a commodity in a can. It is a living product with a past, and it deserves care. Looking back, it is easy to see how unusual that first store was. It did not chase quick profits by cutting corners on quality. It did not try to be everything to everyone. It chose a narrow promise and kept it. Roast well, teach clearly, sell only what belongs with coffee. As marketing scholars later noted when studying the rise of craft and commercial coffee firms, markets change when companies extend better practices to more people, without losing the heart of the craft. The little shop at Pike Place worked at that balance from the start, long before anyone called it a movement. None of this happened in a vacuum. Coffee culture has a long global history, and shifts in taste often begin in one place and echo in another. Historians point out that by the late 20th century, waves of change in roasting, brewing, and serving had begun to roll through many countries. People were learning to ask where beans came from, how they were grown, and how different methods brought out different flavors. The founders in Seattle were part of that broader story, but they were also quietly shaping it in their own corner of the world by insisting that everyday coffee could be better. So the seeds were simple. 3 friends who loved coffee. A room filled with jars of fresh beans, a roaster humming, a siren in the window, a promise to teach. From the first day, they built a place that felt more like a specialty shop than a grocery aisle. They believed that if people tried truly fresh, well-roasted coffee at home, they would never go back. The idea was not flashy, it was steady, it was patient, and it worked because it honored the bean and the person drinking it. That is how a small store at a busy market began a story that would reach far beyond one city, yet never lose the quiet values that started it. Howard Schultz arrived in Seattle with an eye for machines and a hunger for something richer than the usual cup. He had been a young salesman for a housewares company, and he sold espresso machines and other gear to shops that cared about the taste of coffee. When he walked into the small Seattle shop called Starbucks, he felt something gentle and true in the way the owners talked about beans. That first meeting planted a seed. He stayed to learn. He took a job with the tiny shop, and he carried a quiet question with him about what coffee could do for people when it was served in a place made to welcome them. The biographical outlines of these early moves are well known in histories of the company and in profiles of Schultz. A few years later, Schultz took a trip that changed him. He went to Milan to visit a trade show, and he wandered the narrow streets and the busy cafes. In Milan, he watched baristas move like dancers, tamping and steaming, talking and listening to regulars, pouring small cups with equal care for each customer. The coffee there was not just a drink, it was a kind of social pulse. People stopped by for a quick shot and a small talk. Others lingered and read or met a friend. Schultz saw a model that mixed craft, quick ritual, and community, all inside a small room that smelled of warm beans and milk. He later told that story many times, and scholars who study Starbucks and the rise of coffee culture note that Schultz credited those Italian cafes with giving him a new idea of what a coffee place could be. A room where strangers could feel welcome, and where ordinary moments got a small ceremony. Back in Seattle, Schultz tried to share what he had seen. He asked the owners of the small bean shop to let him try selling coffee by the cup, and to build a place that would invite people to sit, talk, and slow down for a few minutes. The owners had started their business to sell roasted beans and to teach people how to make good coffee at home. They worried that running a cafe would pull them away from their core work. They also worried that many Americans then had little taste for espresso drinks and that the cost of machines and training would be high. The conversation between Schultz and the owners opened a quiet rift. Schultz believed that the store could be more than a shop, and that customers would come for the experience of being in the room as much as for the drink. The founders wanted steadier, smaller steps. That disagreement was not a fight so much as a fork in the road. The facts of Schultz leaving to form his own cafe and later buying the original company are part of the company story and are described in detailed case studies and historical records. Refusal did not stop Schultz. He did what many hopeful people do when a door does not open. He built his own. He borrowed money from friends, he found investors who liked the idea, and he opened a small coffee bar that he named after the Italian newspaper he admired. He wanted the new place to host the ritual, and to show how a strong shot of espresso and a well-made cappuccino could feel like a small gift. He bought quality beans and trained staff to pull shots with care and to speak kindly to customers. His new cafes were simple and warm. Word moved slowly like steam rising from a hot cup. People who had not grown up with espresso found they liked the way the drink smelled and how it cut the morning with a small bright note. Schultz's experiment proved that a place could be built around a shared good cup and that people would come back for the feeling they had when they sat there. Contemporary company records and independent studies of the chain note how Il Giornale served as a proving ground for this idea, and how it helped Schultz gather the funds and confidence to take a larger step. In time, Schultz returned to buy the original Seattle business, and he folded his cafes into that name. What he had learned in Milan and in his own shops now found a larger home. He did not simply sell drinks. He built a design for how people could be welcomed and how a brand could shape a place where people felt they belonged. Scholars who write about brands and community see what he did as more than good marketing. They point out that Schultz and his team made an experience that people could learn to care about and then to repeat. The storerooms, the music, the way baristas learned names and orders, the careful roasting of beans, and the steady care for staff all worked together to create a sense of ritual and a sense of membership. This combination helped customers feel part of something that went beyond buying a drink. That effect is at the heart of modern studies about brand communities and the ways that shared rituals around products help people form ties with one another. This was not just simple selling, it was putting the coffee and the room into a larger social idea. The phrase third place, which people often use to explain this kind of shop, points to a space that sits between our home and our work. For many people, the new cafe was a soft, neutral place, where they could be alone without feeling lonely, or meet a friend without ceremony. Scholars who have looked closely at those changes find that the growth of such cafes is part of a wider shift in how people use public space and how brands can shape the feelings attached to that space. In the process, Starbucks came to be read in public conversation in more than one way. Many people loved the new places and the way they made their day feel richer. Others worried about chains replacing small local shops and turning a sense of place into a brand template. Those debates are not about one person alone. They are about how a business can change the rhythms of daily life. If we step back for a moment, we can see that Schultz's story matters because it shows how an idea can travel. One man noticed something small in a foreign city, and he asked how it might fit in his own town. He tried it, learned, and refined an offer until more people found it useful. He also learned that shaping an experience takes time, and that it must be done with care. The lessons that scholars draw from this path speak to simple human things. People want places where they feel safe and where a small habit can unfold. Brands that want to hold those places must pay attention to how people move through the room, how they are greeted, how the product tastes, and how staff are treated. When those things line up, the result can be very plain and very powerful. A slow, steady change in what people expect from their day. Academic work on brand communities and on the social life of cafes uses Starbucks as a clear example of that mix of ritual, craft, and social design. At the same time, the story carries a quiet warning. New habits grow in part because they meet real needs, and in part because they are packaged and shown to many people. That double nature means that the gains of creating a welcoming place must be weighed against the costs of scale, the loss of local styles, and the pressure to keep quality as the business grows. Schultz's first moves show a careful mind and a patient hand. They also show the messy side of any big change. The people who watched him learn and build have continued to study how the coffee room shapes how we meet each other. Those studies remind us that the best places are the ones that keep teaching us how to be kind to strangers, how to care for small work, and how to make a small cup feel like an offering. Howard Schultz arrived at a fork in a simple story and chose the road that would change how many of us start our day. He had already learned two important things before the moment of the purchase. He had learned in Italy that coffee could be a small public ritual, a quick, tender human exchange as much as a drink. He had learned in Seattle that a tiny shop could coax people toward better coffee by roasting beans well and teaching customers how to brew them. What he needed next was a place to put those two lessons together and to make them live at scale. In the late 80s, that chance came when the founders of Starbucks decided to sell the small company they'd built. Howard Schultz and his young Il Giornale business stepped forward, and for $3,800,000 the name Roasting Plant and the 6 existing stores moved into his hands and into a new plan for growth. Buying a company is not the same as making a dream come true. The money that changes hands buys buildings and trademarks, but it does not buy the feeling a company will carry. What Schultz wanted was a different feeling. He wanted each store to feel like a warm room in a home away from home, where people could come alone and not be lonely, or meet a friend and feel welcomed. He wanted the coffee to be honest and good, and the people who worked there to feel they mattered. He kept the old siren logo to keep a link to the shop that had started the story, but he folded his espresso-driven service style into the brand and gave the public a clear promise. The shop would be a place that sold excellent coffee and would also be a place where you could sit for a little while and feel at ease. That simple promise became the North Star for many decisions to come. The business idea that Schultz refined rested on a few careful choices. He would not chase every customer by cutting corners on quality. He would hire people he called partners and treat them as partners in more than name. He would train them to care for coffee and to care for the room. He would invest in benefits and a form of stock ownership so that workers saw themselves as part owners when the company did well. These moves looked unusual at the time, because most retail chains saw part-time workers as a shifting pool that needed quick replacement and not as people to invest in. Providing benefits and a stock program was both a moral stance and a practical bet. It aimed to lower the rough churn of workers and to build a team that could keep the brand promise consistent from one store to the next. Scholars who study employee ownership and stock plans have found that giving workers a real stake tends to shift how people see their work, and in many cases supports better firm performance and more stable work relations. Schultz's Beanstalk plan and early health benefits for part-timers were concrete ways to make the partner idea real and to signal that the company had a long view on people and craft. Those early choices shaped how stores were built and run. The furniture was chosen to invite people to stay. The music and the light were set so a room felt calm and usable. Baristas learned names and orders and the way to pull a shot so it tasted right. Training was not an afterthought. It was a core discipline. The company spent time teaching staff how to talk about beans, how to prepare drinks, and how to treat customers with small acts of attention. This work was slow, hard, and deeply human. It meant that growth would have to be careful. Schultz wanted to grow, but not at the cost of the small practices that made each shop a place people wanted to return to. That tension between speed and care would shape many choices as the company moved out of Seattle and across the country. Scholars of brands and consumer culture later used the Starbucks story to show how companies can create places that people treat as more than stores, because the brand shapes the physical and social feel of the space. When stores keep a consistent look and a consistent set of small rituals, they help customers learn a new habit and form a bond with the brand. There were dollars and practical steps behind the promise. Schultz raised capital from local investors who believed in his idea of a coffee shop as a place to be, not only a place to buy. He merged the Il Giornale operations with the Starbucks name and then slowly opened more locations. He tested menu items, experimented with store designs, and kept the core practice of training and partner care central. In other words, he turned his idea into a repeatable system. That system included clear standards for coffee quality, procedures for training, and tangible benefits for partners. It also included a marketing judgment that the company would rely on experience and word of mouth rather than heavy advertising in the beginning. By making the stores places people wanted to spend time in, the company made itself part of many small private routines. Each routine made the brand stronger. What Schultz created was both a product revolution and a social one. The product revolution was real and direct. The chain sold hot drinks prepared with care and beans roasted to highlight taste. The social revolution was quieter. People began to accept a brand-created place as a legitimate site of everyday life. The phrase "third place" that scholars and writers use to explain this idea names a social room between home and work where people can meet, rest, and do light work. By designing a room and a service that felt hospitable, Starbucks helped create that role for millions of customers. Academics who study brands note how creating such a space can make customers feel like they belong to a shared story, and how this belonging then helps a brand grow beyond its original locale. The Starbucks example later served as a case for how global brands can produce local meaning, and how consumers respond by making the brand part of their daily rituals. The partnership idea mattered in a second way. It helped the company to scale without losing the small human touch it prized. When workers felt they had a stake, and when they were trained to care about products and people, they tended to treat customers with steadier attention. The company's early experiments with benefits and stock helped lower turnover, and to form a workforce that could learn the small skills that define a coffee shop ritual. In practical terms, this meant fewer mistakes, steadier quality, and more stores that felt like places rather than like machines. This human foundation was crucial when the firm later opened many new shops across different cities, because a trained partner in one place could teach customers and new hires the same small rituals that made the brand distinct. Research into employee ownership and firm practice supports the idea that giving workers a share in outcomes changes how they act and how they care for the business. Schultz used this fact as a part of his plan to grow a different kind of retail business. This story is not a simple hymn to one leader. It is a sketch of how a clear idea, backed by patient choices, can change habits. Schultz's purchase of the small Seattle business was the moment when a private wish met a public chance. He used the chance to build a model that combined craft care and a clear social promise. He put money into people, and he put training at the center. He held the line that coffee should taste good, and that the place where people drank it should feel like a small warm room. That mixture of product and place of people and practice is the heart of the change he asked the world to try. Over time, that idea moved beyond one city and became something many of us encounter in our mornings. Scholars study that move because it shows how tastes and habits shift when a company teaches a new way of living slowly and with care. When I think about the third place, I think about a quiet human promise. The third place is the room that is not home and not work, but a third space where people can be themselves, meet others, or simply sit in the company of strangers without the push and hurry of the day. Starbucks did not invent the idea of a third place, but in a quiet and steady way, the company built its stores so that they could play that role for millions of people. In doing so, Starbucks changed not only how coffee is sold, but how people use public rooms in their daily lives. The way the brand shaped those rooms and the meanings people gave them is one of the clearest examples scholars use to study modern third places and the way a brand can reach into everyday life. The idea of a third place was first named by social thinkers who wanted to capture the value of places that are neither home nor work. These are the places where people meet and talk and make small ties that matter. Researchers who study neighborhoods have tested these claims and found that places where people gather help people feel closer to their neighbors and build trust and support in their local area. The finding is simple. Where people have real rooms to meet, neighborhood life tends to be stronger. That is why scholars worry when such places disappear, and why they study how creating or losing third places changes how people connect with each other. Starbucks shaped a third place by treating the store as a service space to be designed with care. Early marketing and services research shows that the physical feel of a shop moves people in simple ways. Light, music, comfortable seats, the smell of fresh coffee, and how staff speak to customers all become signals that tell people how long to stay and how to behave. Mary Jo Bittner explained long ago that managers can shape these signals to make people stay longer, to invite talk, and to make customers feel welcome. Starbucks learned to use these small cues in a steady way so that the stores felt comfortable for many kinds of visits. In plain terms, the stores were made to be easy to enter, to be safe to sit in, and to feel like a modest stage for small acts of daily life. That careful design did not only serve one kind of person, it met many needs at once. Business people found a quiet corner to meet, students found a table to study, parents found a place to sit while a child rested, people who lived alone found a place to be with others without the cost of a long meal. Over time, a new habit formed. People began to bring laptops, to hold short meetings over coffee, and to use the store as a place to work for a few hours. Scholars who study this trend call these customers customer workers, and they have studied how third places adapt when more people use them as workspaces. The simple truth is that the room that welcomes many kinds of visits becomes valuable in a new way when it also helps people get work done. The design choices that invite quiet focus or easy chat become small tools in the life of the city. Starbucks did more than design rooms. It built a brand that meant a certain kind of social life. For many people, a visit to a Starbucks was a small ceremony in the morning, a place to meet a friend, or a neutral room for a short talk. Marketing researchers show that when a brand creates a steady set of rituals and a repeated design, people begin to form shared habits and even a kind of community around the brand. This brand community is not the same as a neighborhood friendship, but it does bind people together through common rituals, language, and expectations. For some customers, Starbucks became that shared place and set of small acts that stitched into their daily rhythms, and scholars use Starbucks as a case to study how brands can shape culture and local meaning. The cultural change was not only gentle and private, it changed how people used time and space in public. Coffee became an experience rather than only a quick beverage. Meetings that once happened over lunch began to move to coffee. A simple phrase like "getting coffee" started to carry a meaning that made short encounters feel normal and acceptable. At the same time, this shift caused a debate. Some people welcomed the warm room and the friendly barista. Others worried that a growing chain might replace smaller local shops and standardize local life. These debates show a hard truth about third places when they scale. A brand can give many people a reliable room to meet, but it can also change the variety of places that used to exist in a neighborhood. Scholars have traced both the creative and the contested sides of this change as the brand moved from one city to many others. Starbucks also tried to build a sense of local belonging inside a global model. In many stores, the company left room for local touches, posted local news and community notices, and worked with neighborhood groups. These small acts help some stores feel more rooted in their place. But research also shows that access to lively third places is not the same everywhere. Some neighborhoods have many places to meet and others have few, and these differences shape who has easy access to the social and practical benefits of third places. Scholars point out that when third places are unevenly spread, the social gains are unequal, so how and where a brand opens stores has consequences beyond coffee. The story of a brand building third places has to be seen next to the larger question of who gets access to the time and space of public life. If we look at how the shop works from the inside, we see small routines that add up. A barista remembers a name, a counter is arranged so people can move with ease, a corner has softer light for reading. These small things are not accidental. They come from a theory that the room matters. Service escape research explains how the built setting organizes behavior and how people learn to move through a room. When a shop insists on steady care for these small things, customers learn new habits. They come to expect a certain calm, a certain tone, a certain speed. Those expectations are the reason the third place idea spread. It was not a single flashy invention. It was lots of careful choices made again and again. The human truth at the center of the third place revolution is simple and tender. People want safe rooms to be themselves, to meet others, and to rest for a few minutes. The stores that work as third places do one small thing very well. They create a setting where people feel allowed to pause. Research on well-being shows that these breaks and small social ties matter for feeling connected and less alone. When people can step into a room that welcomes them, they build tiny habits that ease daily life and sometimes even help them form bonds that matter over time. That quiet benefit is the heart of why places that invite people to stay a little longer are so important. The story of Starbucks in the third place is not an untroubled triumph. It is also a lesson about scale and care. When a small way of doing things becomes a big way of doing things, the challenge is to keep the small human acts alive. The brand showed that careful design, steady service, and an insistence on quality can make a chain feel like a place where people belong. At the same time, scholars remind us that building public life asks more than a comfortable chair. It asks attention to who can enter, who can stay, and how the ordinary work of daily connection is shared in a neighborhood. The third place revolution that Starbucks helped spread gives us an example of how design and human kindness can change daily life, and also a reminder that social life depends on who has a real place to meet. Growing fast can feel like winning and like walking on thin ice at the same time. When Starbucks started to open new shops quickly in the 1990s, the company won many new customers, but it also ran into hard problems that come from getting very big very fast. Good places for stores became harder to find because the best corners and the busiest strips were already taken. At the same time, opening many shops close together sometimes meant one store took customers away from another store that the company already owned. This pattern helped Starbucks make the brand familiar and easy to find, but it also made managers worry about whether new stores were truly adding new sales or simply moving the same customers around. Researchers who have looked at the growth of Starbucks note that the speed and pattern of that expansion shaped the company in ways that made later corrections necessary. Growing quickly also makes keeping the same high quality much harder. At a small scale, it is easier to watch every step of how beans are bought, roasted and brewed. As the number of shops climbs, a company must build bigger roasting centers, build supply systems, and write clear rules so every store pours coffee that tastes right. Starbucks moved in that direction by investing in roasting and in supply systems, and by setting standards for how drinks should be made. In the language of operations and service research, these moves are ways to standardize key parts of the product, so customers get the same basic experience no matter which store they visit. At the same time, service quality depends on people and on small details that are harder to turn into strict rules, so firms must keep testing and adjusting how they do the work. Studies of service quality show that managers must pay attention to both the tangible parts of service, like machines and cups, and to the soft parts, like how staff talk to customers if they want repeat visits. The people who stand at the counter make the promise of a brand feel true or not. For Starbucks, the need to hire and train thousands of new baristas as the chain grew was a real and constant challenge. The food service and hospitality world in general has very high staff turnover, and many businesses struggle to keep workers for more than a few months. High staff churn pushes companies to hire faster, which in turn makes it harder to hold steady service standards. Studies of hospitality and restaurant work show that turnover comes from low-pay, heavy-hours stress during rushes, and from weak chances for stable growth at work. For a company that built its appeal on friendly baristas, who knew customers, the stress of hiring quickly and of dealing with busy lines threatened the very personality of the brand. When customers face long lines, or when drinks come out uneven, they notice. Over time, Starbucks had to learn to balance speed with the cozy, personal touch that made people feel welcome. That balance has become harder as ordering moved onto phones and apps. Mobile ordering can let people skip a line and can raise average check sizes, but it also creates a new kind of workflow inside a store. Baristas must fill app orders and face orders from walk-in customers at the same time, and managers need to design the counter so the whole process is smooth. Research on mobile ordering and on self-service technology in restaurants finds that these systems can improve overall efficiency, but only if store operations are changed to match the new flow. If the store layout, the order handoff area, or staffing plans are not adapted, mobile orders can slow in-store service and increase wait times for some customers. That tension between convenience and the human feel of a shop has been one of the real operational lessons of digital ordering. Financial pressure is another side of rapid growth. New shops cost money to open and to run, and investors watch sales and profit numbers closely. Rapid expansion can push a firm to spend on new stores, even when the older stores are not yet fully settled. In the late 2000s, Starbucks faced a moment when the company had to decide whether to slow down and to return to basics, or to keep opening in the hope that more stores would bring more growth. Shrinking customer visits in tough economic times and the need to show profits forced difficult choices, such as closing underperforming shops and rethinking the pace of growth. Business scholars who have followed Starbucks point out that fast expansion can create a cycle where costs and complexity rise faster than customer habits change, and that is a common cause of the financial growing pains many fast-moving retail chains feel. Faced with these problems, Starbucks tried a mix of practical choices and serious investments. The company put money into training and into clearer standards, so new hires could reach the same level of skill faster. It invested in better equipment and in larger roasting and blending centers, so stores had steady supply of coffee with consistent flavor. The firm also began to use data and scheduling tools to manage busy times and to predict inventory needs more accurately. On the people side, Starbucks kept offering benefits and stock programs that made hourly work feel more like a job with future value rather than only a short-term stop. The broad body of research on shared ownership and on employee benefits suggests that when workers feel included in a company and when they can share in its success, turnover and conflict decline and commitment grows. Those ideas help explain why companies that treat staff as partners often do better at keeping steady service as they expand. Some ideas work better than others. Large-scale retraining days and ongoing coffee education help bring back a focus on quality. Technology investments such as mobile ordering and customer apps have driven big gains in convenience and in sales, but they also required the company to change how in-store work was organized. Regular local manager meetings and the sharing of best practices across stores helped spread useful fixes quickly. Scholars who study fast growth and service chains emphasize that culture matters as much as process. When managers keep explaining why a way of working is important, and when they give staff time and tools to learn that way, the shops tend to feel more consistent to customers. The trick is to make sure that the drive for speed and scale does not drown the small human acts that made the brand matter in the first place. There is a steady lesson in all this for any brand that grows fast. Expansion brings chance and risk at the same time. Managing the risk means being blunt about which parts of the business must stay carefully human and which parts can be standardized or automated. It means investing in training and in systems that keep quality high. It means listening to staff and building ways that they can learn and grow so that the brand keeps its voice even when the company gets much bigger. In the end, growing strong is less about opening the most shops and more about growing the habits and systems that let the best parts of the brand travel to new places and keep working there. When I think about how Starbucks stepped beyond selling beans and turned small ideas into new ways to make money, I imagine a slow and careful opening of many small doors. One of the first of those doors was a simple blended drink that felt like a treat rather than a cup of coffee. The company learned how to make drinks that tasted like desserts and then put them into the world in different forms. Some of those forms were made in the store and some were made elsewhere and brought to a shelf or a cooler. The neat thing was that the same basic idea could be sold in more than one place and in more than one way. That move changed how the business grew and how people thought about Starbucks as more than a cup of coffee. The Frappuccino story shows this change clearly. The drink started as a cold, blended treat that many people liked for its smooth texture and sweet taste. It was not just for regular coffee drinkers, but for people who wanted something that felt like a milkshake or a snack. Starbucks then used a partnership to put a bottled version into stores, where people bought groceries and snacks. For a customer who did not have time or did not want to visit a shop, that bottled drink made Starbucks present in a new moment of the day. The move into bottled drinks was not just a new package, it was a new place to sell the same idea, and it reached customers who might never walk into a Starbucks store. The partnership and the move into ready-to-drink drinks shaped the company in a quiet but very big way. At the same time that Starbucks was turning drinks into products that could live outside the cafe, the wider market was changing too. Cold and ready-to-drink coffee grew into its own category, and scientists and food scholars began to study the ways cold brew and bottled coffee are different from hot brew and from in-store drinks. These studies show that cold extraction and different ways of bottling change flavor and chemistry, and that consumers respond to those differences in clear ways. The new science around cold brew and ready-to-drink coffee helped companies like Starbucks plan new products and choose how to present them on shelves and in coolers. The result was a long list of new offerings that could sell in summer and in warm places and bring new income to the brand. Seasonal drinks offer another clean example of how menu changes create new money. In its simplest form, a seasonal drink is a short-lived flavor that appears at a certain time of year. The pumpkin spice latte is the famous example, and it shows how flavor timing can become a cultural sign. The idea is to make a product feel special and temporary so that people want it now rather than later. Research into how scarcity and seasonality work in marketing shows that limited time items often create a strong early rush of interest and trial. They spike attention and can lift overall visits to stores even when many customers do not buy the featured item. The seasonal push is part sense and part memory. The smell of spices and warm flavors can bring back comfortable memories and make the drink feel like a small ritual or a welcome sign of a changing season. These two effects together help explain why a short-lived flavor can become a long-lived moneymaker. The move beyond cups also meant Starbucks had to think about food and about how food could turn a quick coffee visit into a fuller trip. Food partnerships and small acquisitions were tools that let the company add pastries, sandwiches, and other items without building the full baking systems of a traditional bakery inside each store. For a time, Starbucks bought a small bakery brand and opened a tea brand that brought new products and ideas into the firm. The hope was simple: add more moments when a customer chooses Starbucks over another place, and make each visit worth $1 or $2 more. Those moves sometimes worked and sometimes taught hard lessons about what customers really wanted. The basic logic remained clear. Expand what you sell in ways that feel natural for the brand, and you grow revenue at more times of day. Another important door that Starbucks opened was technology. The company built an app and a loyalty program that let customers order ahead, pay on their phone, and earn rewards. These changes did not just make lines shorter, they turned each visit into data, and each piece of data into a way to make better choices about menus, times of day, and promotions. Modern research into mobile apps shows that apps can shape customer journeys and create advantage when they are designed to improve the whole experience. Apps let companies learn what customers like and then give small nudges or offers that bring them back again and again. The app and the loyalty program became a way to move customers to new items on the menu and to test new ideas quickly without needing a big ad campaign. Product diversity also meant selling things beyond the store menu. Many of the brand moves were about placing Starbucks into new places in customers' lives. Bottled drinks sold in grocery stores made the brand a part of home life. Packaged coffee beans and single-serve cups let people make Starbucks-style drinks at home. Mugs and small machines let the brand sit on kitchen counters. Those moves built steady revenue that did not depend on foot traffic and that could survive slow days in the stores. The core idea was to make the brand useful in more ways so that customers kept thinking of it first when they wanted coffee or a treat. All of these moves also changed how teams inside the company worked. Innovation had to connect with the frontline barista and with a product team that could work with grocery partners and the people who made bottles. Jobs and skills multiplied. The firm learned to test a small number of stores before a big rollout to see what worked and to use customer data to guide decisions. This careful testing and steady learning is what turned many small menu ideas into broad revenue streams rather than a one-hit wonder. A drink that looks fun can quickly become a burden if it is hard to make or if it slows down service. The company learned that a big idea needed small steps to become a long-lived success. It is easy to tell this story as if success came from a single stroke of luck, but the truth is quieter and steadier. Starbucks mixed careful experiments with brand moves that fit the company voice. It added sweet blended drinks and then put versions of them on shelves. It used seasonality and scent to make simple feelings into repeat visits. It bought or worked with other food brands to make the menu richer, and it used an app to learn what people liked and when they wanted it. In the end, those moves turned a coffee shop into a set of ways to sell coffee and related goods in many times and many places, and each new way brought its own steady income. When Starbucks first stepped beyond the familiar streets of Seattle, it did not rush or simply plant a green logo and wait for people to fall in love. The company moved slowly and watched closely. Its very first store outside North America opened in Tokyo in the mid-1990s, and that opening was more than a new shop. It was a test to see whether the quiet ritual of good coffee and gentle company could cross oceans and become part of another city life. The reason Starbucks picked places like Tokyo first was not because coffee lovers were everywhere. It was because some cities had a patient sense for craft and detail, and because local partners helped the company learn fast. In Japan, many people already cared about small, beautiful things and careful work. This made it possible for Starbucks to introduce its idea slowly and to shape the offer to local tastes. The company did not try to be the same everywhere. Instead, it learned to speak a local language of place and taste while keeping a few core rules. Scholars who study how global brands meet local cultures call this a brandscape and show how the same brand can mean different things in different cities. That work helps explain why Starbucks found early success when it treated each new market as a place of negotiation rather than a place to force a hard sell. Learning to fit in meant changes to what was sold and how stores looked. In some places, green tea flavors and local pastries joined the menu so that customers would not feel pushed into an unfamiliar habit. In others, the shops were arranged to mirror neighborhood rhythms. The aim was to make a store feel familiar to the local eye and ear, while still carrying the signature of the company. Designers and researchers later wrote about how Starbucks used materials, lighting, and furniture to create a sense of local belonging and at the same time keep a global look. Those studies make clear that the visual and material choices inside a shop are not small details. They are the words a brand uses to speak to a community. Behind these visible moves, there was a careful choice about how to enter new countries. Companies have many ways to open abroad. They can build and run every shop themselves. They can sell the right to use the name to a local company, or they can find a local partner to share the work and the risk. For a big coffee company, the choice matters a lot because local rules, costs, and customer tastes can be very different. Modern research on entry modes shows that forming joint ventures or working with the right local partner often helps a firm survive and adapt. because partners bring knowledge of local suppliers, laws, and habits. Starbucks used a mix of these methods as it grew, choosing the path that best fit each place. This mix of careful entry choices and local help let the brand grow without losing touch with local buyers. The way a store feels inside matters more than many people expect. A quiet chair, a warm lamp, and a friendly staff member who knows how you like your drink can change a person's day. Marketing and service research has long shown that the physical space around service work shapes how people feel and how they act. Starbucks learned to shape that space on purpose. Stores were designed to invite a slow cup and a soft conversation, or a private hour with a book and a drink. This attention to space helped the company sell more than coffee. It sold an idea of a gentle public room where people could pause. That idea worked in many cities but always had to be tuned to local ways of being together. The results were mixed at times, and the lessons were plain. When Starbucks pushed a uniform model too fast, the stores could look generic and lose the local feel that made them special. When the company listened and used local knowledge, the shops could feel rooted and welcome. Research on consumer reactions to global brands shows a steady tension. Some local people embrace a famous foreign brand as a sign of modern life. Others see it as a threat to small local cafes and resist. The balances between global power and local meaning are delicate and must be managed with care. That is why the careful acts of listening and adapting became as important as the recipe for a good espresso. A second lesson was about menu and product rhythm. In many Asian markets, for example, coffee was not the default drink at home. Tea had a strong place in daily life. Starbucks learned to place coffee beside tea, not on top of it. The menu grew to include drinks and snacks that echoed local flavors. The point was not pretending to be local, but offering a bridge where local taste met a consistent quality standard. That kind of thoughtful blending helped Starbucks become more than a foreign brand with a green sign. It became an option people could choose in ways that felt natural to them. Real challenges arrived with scale and with new competition. High rents in big cities complicated where stores could open. Rules about who can own what and how food is sold forced different business models in different places. New local chains sometimes moved faster and pushed prices down. At the same time, the very strength of the Starbucks idea meant many cities already had other coffee places that offered a stronger local authenticity. Those pressures taught the company that expansion without careful thought cost more than patience. The scholarly view is clear. International growth asks for a blend of global skill and local craft. Successful global firms learn to make that blend without losing their center. If there is a short way to say what made Starbucks work abroad, it is this. The company started with a clear love for coffee and a model of calm social space. It then learned that the love for coffee needed to be shown in ways that made sense to each city. It paired global standards with real listening. It chose partners where it needed local help. It changed store design and menus where that made sense. And when it tried to be everywhere exactly the same, it paid a price. Scholars who study brands and global business remind us that this mix of care and flexibility is not a fast formula. It is a patient craft that mixes deep company values with respect for local life. Starbucks chose a quiet path into the digital age, and that choice changed how we meet the day. At first, the company did small things that felt simple. It put free wireless internet in many stores early on. It made deals with music services, so the songs in the stores felt like part of the experience. It fixed how cards were processed to make payments faster, and it learned how to send a short note by email to tell people about a new drink. All these small steps were gentle ways to help a busy customer move through a day with less friction and with a bit more pleasure. The company later put these small steps together into a larger plan that used phones and data to shape both the cup and the room where people drank it. The company records and case studies show that mobile payments began to matter in the early years of the 21st century, and that a major push came when the Starbucks Card mobile app allowed customers to pay with their phones in 2011. What matters most about the early moves is that Starbucks used technology to hold the same idea it had always held about the store. The store was meant to be a warm room and a way to slow a busy day. Technology was used not to push customers through faster and colder, but to remove small annoyances so customers could enjoy the time they spent there. Free wireless made it easier for a student to study. Cozy playlists made a short wait feel calmer. Quick payments made it easier for a parent on the way to work to step in and step out without fuss. These choices match what scholars call servicescape, the idea that the physical setting and the small cues inside a room shape how people act and feel. Paying attention to light, chair, music, and smell is as much a part of the digital plan as the lines of code that run an app. The next big change was the phone in the customer's hand. The app began as a way to carry a coffee card and to pay without fumbling for cash. Over time, it became the place where customers asked for what they wanted and where the company learned what people liked. The app let people order ahead and skip the line, and it let the company reward people who returned again and again. The loyalty program started long before phones as a simple card, but when it moved inside the app, it became a tool that could give small rewards, show progress, and even create game-like moments that nudged people to visit more often. Scholars who study loyalty programs find that when these programs are well designed, they raise buying behavior and can be powerful, especially when they are tied to clear rewards and easy ways to use them. A careful review of decades of loyalty program research shows that such programs do change how people behave, and that the design of the program matters for long-term effects. Putting ordering and rewards on a phone also changed the work behind the counter. When people could pay with a tap or order from home, the store still had to make the drinks and hand them to people smoothly. This required rethinking how the team worked, how space inside the shop was used, and how the flow of orders was shown to staff. Early experiments with order-ahead services started in a handful of places and then were rolled out more widely once the company saw the patterns of use. Scholars who look at mobile ordering across restaurants find that these systems can boost sales and reduce friction, but also change how workers juggle tasks. The research shows that apps help restaurants sell more, but they also force a careful redesign of the steps that lead from order to handoff, so customers do not end up waiting in new ways. The balance between speed and human care becomes the central problem to solve. Data became the quiet engine behind many of these moves. Each registered card and each app click taught the company what people liked when they came and what they might try next. That allowed the brand to send offers that felt personal and to test new drinks in a small set of stores before asking every barista to learn a new recipe. It also let managers plan staff and inventory with more skill so that a busy morning had enough beans and enough hands, and a slow afternoon did not waste food. Work in retail technology shows that this kind of personalization and prediction rests on good data and on simple choices about what to recommend and when to offer it. When done well, customers feel seen and companies sell more. When done poorly, people feel watched and confused. The best work in this field reminds us that the goal is to make life easier for real people, not to flood them with messages. The rewards program also grew more playful and more tied to habit. Small badges and points and special offers that appear inside the app create a gentle loop that asks someone to return. Scholars who study gamified loyalty programs find that game-like elements increase engagement when they are built around intrinsic motives like mastery and progress, rather than only short-term bargains. The app used these ideas to nudge people to try a new seasonal drink, to come back on a slow day, or to add a pastry to a coffee. Over time, these small nudges changed the frequency of visits and the size of each order. At the same time, the academic work shows that the effect is strongest when the program feels fair and when people understand how rewards are earned and used. Social media became a second stage for connection. A photogenic cup and a new look for a seasonal drink spread quickly on feeds, and the company used those moments to learn what colors or flavors drew attention. The brand also used social channels to answer questions and to solve small complaints quickly and publicly. Research into social media and service firms shows that fast public replies can turn a small complaint into a loyal customer when the tone is kind and the solution is clear. But the same channels also expose mistakes widely, so the firm had to match its public voice to the quiet care inside every store. This public practice pushed operations to be more exact and to train staff to meet the standards that the brand had promised. The changes inside shops were practical and small, and they mattered a lot. Baristas learned to manage orders from a screen to the left, while also talking to the person at the counter. Managers use simple models to predict how many people would come at a certain hour and to schedule staff so that no one was overwhelmed. Inventory systems tied to digital sales let managers know when a flavor was running low and when a pastry had not sold. The result was fewer surprises and fewer unhappy waits. Academic work on technology in retail shows that systems like these reduce waste, raise efficiency, and let staff spend more time on human things like greeting and learning a regular customer's name. But the work also warns that technology is no cure for bad staffing or rushed training. People still matter most. Looking forward, the road is not only about apps and screens. The same data that feeds a loyalty program can also help suggest a drink or a snack that fits a person's past choices, or that suits the weather and time of day. New tools that use artificial intelligence can make these suggestions feel smarter and more helpful. They can also help plan routes for supply trucks and forecast which farms will need new orders. Peer-reviewed research on personalization and predictive analytics in retail warns that the power of these tools grows only when companies treat privacy and fairness as basic rules. Customers will accept help, but they will not accept feeling exposed. The same soft care that made a single neighborhood store a warm room must shape how the brand uses data at scale. The digital turn changed the shape of the company without changing its purpose. The work of the past decades shows that technology is most powerful when it serves the human aim of making daily life a bit kinder and easier. For Starbucks, the promise was always the same: a warm room, a good cup, and a friendly moment. The phone, the app, the data, and the screens are tools to keep that promise for more people and in more moments. The research behind loyalty programs, services, capes, mobile ordering, and personalization gives a clear guide. Use technology to remove friction, not to replace warmth. Train people not only to use tools, but to hold the human touch that makes a room matter. When those things align, the result is small and steady changes in habit that feel simple, but that reshape how we move through the day. When the world stumbled into the recession of 2008, Starbucks felt the cold wind like everyone else. People tightened their belts and began to think twice about small daily luxuries. Coffee was no longer just a warm ritual for many. It became a choice between convenience and cutting back. Researchers who study how people buy things in hard times show that during deep economic shocks, people put necessities first and cut back on what they see as discretionary treats. This shift in everyday money choices helped explain why a company built on what felt like a small daily treat suddenly saw fewer customers. Howard Schultz came back to lead the company at that hard moment. He walked into a business that had grown fast and lost some of the careful focus that had made it special. The stores were many, and the brand had spread into corners of life it had not planned for. Schultz said the company had started to forget two simple things. One was the quality of the coffee itself. The other was the feeling a guest should get when they set foot in a shop. He decided to do something that felt dramatic and honest. In late winter of 2008, he closed thousands of company-owned stores for a few hours and asked every barista to come together to relearn the basic craft of espresso and to renew the small acts of customer care that create a special visit. The move cost money in the moment, but it sent a clear message about where the company wanted to stand. News reports and company accounts at the time documented the closures and the temperature of the turnaround plan. There was more than a single training day. Schultz launched a transformation plan that asked the whole company to slow down and choose quality over speed. The leaders closed stores that were not working, tightened the menu so baristas could focus on making drinks well, and opened conversations across the company about what made Starbucks different in the first place. This kind of retrenchment and refocus is a classic way firms try to survive a deep downturn. Studies that look at how organizations turn themselves around in hard times point to practical steps like cutting what does not work, investing in the skills that matter, and reminding people why the work matters. The hard choices that year were not just about money. They were about the small crafts and daily habits that make a brand feel real. A big part of the story was that Starbucks did not try to be everything to everyone anymore. The company reduced clutter on the menu, put a fresh focus on training baristas, and tried to make each cup taste like the company cared. Day by day, store by store, that choice began to nudge customers back. People noticed when the coffee smelled better, and when the person behind the counter seemed calm and confident. That is not a magic trick. It is the slow rebuilding of craft and trust. Business scholars call this a return to core competence. It is hard work, and it is easy to underestimate how much customers feel it. Harvard Business School and many business writers later described that phase as a mix of bold moves and quiet work on quality. At the same time, the world was watching Starbucks on other fronts. The brand had grown so large that critics and communities sometimes pushed back. Questions about how coffee was bought, how farmers were treated, and how cups and packaging affected the planet became louder. The coffee sector itself is full of complex pressures. Farms face the threat of changing weather and shifting markets. Programs that aim to make coffee buying fairer and greener exist in many forms. Some are third-party certification systems, and some are corporate programs created by big buyers. Academic reviews that study these various efforts show a mixed picture. Some initiatives raise incomes or protect the land in places where coffee is grown. Others are harder to measure, and power imbalances in the supply chain can make it difficult for farms to capture long-term gains. The net result is a complicated patchwork of progress and open problems. For a company that buys beans around the world, making clear and honest progress on these issues is both a moral and a business task. The other problem that rose beside supply concerns was labor tension at the store level. As Starbucks became a giant employer, a new generation of store workers began to ask for different things. They wanted stronger voice at work, fairer scheduling, and clearer paths for pay and security. In recent years, many stores in the United States and elsewhere have seen organizing drives and bargaining efforts. Researchers who have followed these movements point out that new forms of organizing mix online networks with old-fashioned workplace action. Those studies show how workers build support and how firms respond. Labor friction is not a simple moral story or a single-sided economic one. It is about how a big company manages everyday work and how its choices affect the people who make the coffee every day. Those tensions are part of the recent chapter of the company and a reminder that growth brings new responsibilities. Competition also tightened. Fast food chains and grocery stores began to serve better coffee, and some new chains built strong local bonds in cities and towns. When cheaper options are good enough, premium brands must justify their higher price with a better experience, a better product, or both. So Starbucks doubled down in three directions. It worked on quality again, it tried to be clearer about what experience it offered, and it invested in new ways to serve people, from quicker pickup lanes to a growing digital system that let guests order ahead. These steps were not just technology for technology's sake, they were about preserving the value that customers felt when they chose one cup over another. The move showed that the company had learned to match its global scale with local attention and to mix craft with convenience. When we sit back and look at the arc of that tough decade, we see a few plain but important lessons. First, brand strength can be fragile if a company grows faster than its systems and values. Second, retraining and a public recommitment to the core product can be a bold and effective way to rebuild trust. Third, the broader connections that a coffee company must manage do not stop at the store door. Sustainable supply chains, fair treatment of workers, and a clear sense of purpose all fold into whether a global brand can stay steady in hard times. Scholars who study coffee and supply chains remind us that these problems are shared across the whole trade, so solutions need patient, long-term work as much as smart, short-term fixes. When I think about the future that Starbucks is trying to build, I picture a long, warm room that keeps growing but still wants to feel like home. The company already has tens of thousands of stores around the world, and it has a clear plan to grow much more. In public statements, Starbucks has said it will expand its global store count to about 55,000 by 2030, and that most new stores in the near term will open outside the United States as the company leans into fast-growing markets and digital tools to reach customers. That plan is not only about adding signs to streets, it is about making different kinds of signs in different places. Some of the new stores are tiny pickup-only spots built for people who order on their phones. Some are drive-thrus tuned for speed and ease, and some are large reserve roasteries that act like small theaters of coffee where rare beans are roasted and where people can take classes or taste unusual cups. The idea is simple in words, but rich in work. Build many ways for people to meet the brand and make each way feel like it belongs in the moment and place. The company has also tied growth to a strong promise about the planet. Starbucks has said it wants to become resource positive by 2030 and to halve its carbon, water, and waste footprints in the coming years. To try to meet those goals, the firm has invested in greener store designs, in programs that help farmers use better growing practices, and in trials of reusable cup systems and lower impact packaging. Those moves aim to hold growth and care for the earth together, though real progress will take long, steady work and honest measurement. Technology sits at the center of how Starbucks plans to make more ways to meet customers feel simple and true. The mobile app and the digital reward system have already changed how people order and how the company learns about what they like. The app lets people pay ahead, skip lines, and collect rewards, and the data that comes from those visits helps managers decide when to open a store, how to stock it, and what new drinks might be welcomed. By folding digital tools into the daily work, the company hopes to scale the friendly moments that matter while making service faster and more reliable. These ideas sound new, but they rest on older truths about places and people. Research shows that the physical feel of a shop, the light, the chairs, the sound, and the way staff greet you shape how you act and how you feel in a room. Scholars call this the servicescape, and they show that small design choices change whether people stay or go. When a brand cares for these small things, it helps make a place feel like a gentle room rather than a machine, and that feeling supports long-term loyalty. Part of that loyalty is social. The way Starbucks has grown has taught many people a small set of rituals for coffee and for meeting in public. Scholars who study brand communities show how repeated rituals and shared language let strangers feel part of something common. When a chain keeps small acts consistent across many stores, people start to take comfort in the predictability and to treat the brand as a kind of social home. Those ties can help a global company travel across cities and cultures, but they can also raise questions about what is lost when many places use the same script. Starbucks also plans to keep making new products and new formats that meet changing tastes. People want more plant-based options, more drinks that feel healthy, and more food for different times of day. The company tests new ideas in a few stores before it asks every barista to learn a new recipe. This patient testing helps avoid mistakes and protects the steady work of service while it reaches for new sales and new customers. That same testing and data led Starbucks to create bottled drinks sold in stores and to partner with other food makers so the brand can be useful both inside a cafe and at home. The store workers matter at the heart of every plan. Starbucks calls them partners, and the company has long used benefits and stock programs to try to make work steadier and more meaningful. Research into employee ownership and broad staff involvement finds modest positive links to firm performance and to worker attitudes when programs are well done. Those links are not a guarantee, but they point to a real truth. If staff feel respected and if they can learn and grow, then the human side of a store is easier to keep as the chain grows larger. Digital growth brings a second human task, which is to use customer data with care. Personalized offers and recommendation systems can help people find a drink they will love and can bring them back more often. But academic work also warns about a personalization privacy paradox. People welcome useful suggestions, but they resist feeling watched. The lesson is clear: use data to be helpful, not creepy, and pair digital convenience with clear privacy and fairness rules. Expanding in other countries brings both hope and hard work. China and other Asian markets are central to Starbucks' future. The brand has said it expects much of its new store growth to come from places outside the United States, and it is already running many different formats in cities across Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Success in those places depends on finding local partners, listening to how people like to drink, and adapting menus and store design while keeping a clear quality standard. When companies try to be the same everywhere, they can fail, but when they learn from local partners, they can build meaning in new homes. The path forward will not be simple. Many critics ask whether a giant chain can stay true to local culture and to sustainability while it opens more stores and seeks profit. The competition from local roasters and from fast chains that now make good coffee has never been stronger. Customers also want healthier and greener options, and rising costs mean the company must be careful to keep quality without pushing prices too far. The work of growth is as much about restraint as it is about bold moves. Choosing where to put a new store and how to design it are quiet decisions that add up to a brand that either feels generous or merely bigger. If I had to say what matters most in the next chapter, it would be this. A big idea can be kept alive only by millions of small acts. Train people well, listen to customers, make space for local life, and use technology to remove friction, not to replace warmth. When those small acts are done again and again, a company can grow without losing the quiet values that first made people notice it. That is the challenge Starbucks set for itself, and the gentle test it now faces as it tries to become a true global home for a simple daily ritual.